In today's video, we're visiting Gwern Einion, a beautiful but heavily disturbed site, perched with coastal views on the steep hills of Gwynedd, northwest Wales. Oddly nestled into the courtyard of a now derelict farm, this single structure is all that's left of what was once a much larger Neolithic complex. Said to include terraces, mounds and walled enclosures, as well as 4 or 5 altar stones and another Cromlech. So how did it end up like this? Well, join us as we take shelter under the Cromlech and delve into what was written about its destruction over 100 years ago. But first, welcome back to our channel, Coral Jacks, where we've been exploring the history and folklore of ancient sites around Wales. After a much quieter video due to sickness last week, apologies to our regular viewers, we're back to our usual format and visiting another Neolithic site. In our last Cromlech video, we were at Pentrefan, in our home county of Pembrokeshire. But today, only 100 miles drive away, we're pretty much at the opposite end of the country. In the west of Eryri, Snowdonia National Park, Gwern Einion lies on the rugged coastal hills between Wales's tallest mountains. With commanding views over surrounding hills and coastline, this was a powerful strategic location with signs locally of continued habitation throughout the ages. An area rich in Neolithic history and Welsh folklore. We'll be visiting more sites in this area in our next videos. Testament to the defensive advantages of this impressive landscape, only a mile and a half away is the magnificent Harlech Castle, which we just happened to be visiting with our adorable nephews Arthur and Leonard. So shout out to them for showing us around the castle walls. They're our biggest little fans. Anyway, after handing the boys in at the castle dungeon, we found this site on OS maps and headed up into the hills. We parked about a mile away as the road was narrow and the verge was soft. Coming up in the video, it looks like a handy spot to park right next to the footpath. But this was the only passing place for a long stretch, and there were wide tyre tracks heading down through the grass that suggested it had been recently used. As we got into the field and onto the footpath, the rain eased and the sun broke through and scattered rainbows around us. Coming over the brow of the hill, we were greeted by the outline of the capstone, framed by the skeletal remains of a derelict building. But we were also greeted by the inquisitive looks of a small herd of cows, and despite Coral's apprehension about walking the dog too close to the cows, we continued forwards and they all remained calm, moving slowly and left it at inquisitive looks. It might sound strange to some, but it's commonly said that each Cromlech or standing stone has its own special feel to it, its own energy. And whether you explain it as a religion, magic, placebo or coincidence, this one is certainly interesting and magical in its own way. It could simply have been the extreme contrast in the weather from north to south, the sporadic rainbows or the freshly placed bones in the centre of the monument, but something felt very alive and unrested about this place. As the rain came down and I leaned back into the shelter of the portal, I felt the strong tug of a nostalgia for a time and place never been, something the Welsh word hiraeth conveys slightly better than the English word anamoia. The name of the site is made up of 2 parts. Gwern, meaning marsh or swampy ground, and Einion, which is a person's name, therefore Einion's Marsh, and the farmhouse nearby still carries the name. In the 1921 book, named An Inventory of the Ancient Monuments in Wales and Monmouthshire, the author writes that this Cromlech occupies a site about 300 yards west of the farmstead of Gwern Einion. It adjoins a beast house on the east, and is in the line of the wall on the west, its long axis being east and west. The capstone, a fine block of about 9 feet long by 4 feet broad and 1 foot thick, rests upon only 3 supporters and is now tilted from east to west. The tallest supporting stone measures 7 feet 3 inches high. There are other uprights which shut off the chamber, and a large stone 5 feet in length, which may also have served the same purpose, is now built into the wall close at hand. Some low walling has been put up to better adapt the structure to its present use as a pigsty. A not very accurate drawing of this Cromlech appears in the Archaeologia Cambrensis of 1869. Built into the west wall of the field, immediately west of Gwern Einion farmhouse, is a huge stone, 6 feet long and about 18 inches thick, which is believed to have been the capstone of a destroyed Cromlech, and other large stones in the same wall may have been the supporters. But there are no surface indications that such a structure ever stood in the field. In the Antiquary for 1893, is a posthumous article of Mr. H. Llyn, who examined several of the prehistoric monuments of West Merioneth in the year 1870. The views held by Mr. Lyons on these structures are not those now generally accepted, but as a different state of things may have existed in that year from what presented themselves to the inspecting officer of this commission in May 1914, the record of what Mr. Lyons believed he found at this spot is desirable. His opening remarks are as follows. At a distance of 10 miles south of Llyn, on an upland with a range of views in all directions, is a group of Celtic remains occupying a space of 500 feet, with outlying portions in various directions. They consist of mounds and terraces from 3 feet to 5 feet high, on which 2 cromlechai, 3 lustration basins, 2 idol stones, 4 or 5 altar stones, 2 walled enclosures, and between 20 and 30 semicircles and sections of circles, with a large broken monument, probably an altar. These remains have been the quarry from which 3 or 4 houses, outbuildings, and a long line of enclosure walls have been supplied with materials for their construction. The surface of the ground upon which they lie does not appear to have been disturbed since they were placed there. The intervening space between the northern Cromlech and the first curved outlines denoting circles forms a broad flat terrace of 300 feet by 70 feet. From the edge of this terrace, the ground slopes gradually into a wide hollow space of 300 feet by 250 feet, strewn all over with the vestiges of the ever-reoccurring stone rings. Those in the centre of the hollow being much destroyed, while those on the slopes of the terraces are sufficiently distinct to admit of some idea of the general plan being arrived at. Here also we find certain triangular and other shaped stones of a remarkable character, most of them retaining their original positions in the arrangement, while a few have been twisted out of their places. The entire group, excluding the northern Cromlech, may be divided into 3 or 4 sections, which Mr. Lyons proceeds to describe with great minuteness. In another book, named Megalithic Inquiries in the West of Britain, published in 1969, they have a picture of it looking different with more stones, and they appear to be comparing this one to others in the area that we have also visited. They describe Gwern Einion as a portal dolmen, small, wedge-shaped chamber with tall portal stones and a closing slab. Together with a sloping capstone, the remains are incorporated into a modern wall with no evidence of a cairn. Standing on a small plateau above the river Arto is in every way a typical portal dolmen, such as were first recognised in Ireland. The portal stones are about 6 foot high and support a large capstone which slopes steeply backwards in a characteristic manner to rest on an end stone a little over 3 feet high. The closing slab between the portals rises 4 foot 5, sufficiently high in the writer's opinion to describe the tomb as being fully closed. Only on one side stone, that at the south, remains in situ. At present there is a gap at the north side between the portal and the end stone, but in the modern wall just behind the chamber stands a large slab of a suitable size. W.F. Grimes suggests that this stone might be the remains of a second chamber, but the present writer does not consider its position original. It is not embedded in the ground and could well be the missing orthostat, moved by the farmer who converted the tomb into a shed. The remains of the cairn are very slight. Presumably most of it has been used in building the sheepfolk walls which now surround the chamber.